In this lesson, you're going to learn how to pull an image from the Docker Hub registry, how to examine it, and how to list the layers that represent an image. Now let's say you want to run a container with Windows Nano Server. This is created specifically for running containers. It's a small scale version of the Windows Server. Now let's find out what image do you need in order to run this container. And there is an example here where it's a docker run command, and this part itself here represents the image. Before running a container, you can also manually pull an image, and that's what I'm going to show you here. Before that, let's understand what each of these fields mean in this image. Now, an image can contain up to 4 fields. The first is the application that you want to run. That's generally is represented by a repository. That's the Nano server here. Colon is what represents the tag. And then who owns this repository? The user or the namespace is Windows here. And then you also define the the registry URL as part of the image. Now, image can contain up to 4 fields. Out of these, not all are mandatory. Only one field is mandatory. Let's have a look at that. So the first field is registry. The second field is the namespace. Namespace can represent a user, an organization, or a project name, or a combination of this. And then the repository. The third field is the repository. The name of the application typically is the name of the repository, and the tag represents one specific version of the image in that repository. Out of this, only one is mandatory, that is the Nano server. That is the third field, which represents the repository or your application. Everything else has a default. The default for the tag is latest. So if you do not provide the tag, it's going to assume as latest. The default for the namespace, if you do not see the namespace, that is going to be root namespace. What that means is this would be an official image if there was this part missing. And the last part is the registry. If you do not provide a registry, it is the default, which is Docker Hub. Now that we've learned how the image looks like, what fields exist, let's pull it to our local Docker host. Before you do that, you can list all the images by running docker image ls command. Docker image ls shows you which images are present locally on your Docker host. I see a hello world image. That's what I had pulled while doing the validation by running docker run hello world. I could individually pull the image as well by running a docker image command. To find out more information about which commands exist for docker image, I could just list it by running docker image this way. I do see a list of commands which are specific to the image operations. One of that includes a docker pull command, and that's what I'm going to use to pull an image from the registry. And this is where I provide all the fields of the image, including the registry, which is mcr.microsoft.com, Windows, which is the namespace, Nano server, that's my repository, the same repository I am looking at here, and a specific version of Nano server. I'm going to use 1809 version of that image. And when I do this, it says pulling it from the Windows Nano server. That's from the registry. The registry is represented here. And if you look at it, it pulls it as a layer, one layer at a time. And this image might have just one layer, and that's the reason why you see only one line item here. But if you had images with multiple layers, you would have seen multiple line items, and it would pull the images one layer at a time. And this pull is complete. I can list the image and examine it using docker image ls command again. Now I do see this new image from this registry with this namespace with a repository Nano server with a tag 1809. This represents the ID, a unique ID of the image on that registry, and I also see when was it created, how much is the size of that image. If I want to examine this further, I was talking about the layering concept. If I want to see all these layers of the image, I could just run docker image history, a very useful command to examine these images, and I have to provide the entire tag, including the version. And as you see, it has this image with only one layer. If you want to see multiple layers, maybe hello world could be of help. So I could just say docker image history hello-world, and it is the latest version. Since it is the latest, which is default, I can omit that as well. Now you can see it. So it's 3 layers as part of this image. There's only one image, which is hello world of size 251 MB, but it is made up of 3 different layers, and each of this line item represents a layer in the image. And you also see what is part of that image, what created this image, and we are going to look at what creates an image, how do you create these layers, what happens when you build an image, and so on later part of in another session. But this is how the images look like. And what I've shown you is how do you pull an image, and in the next lesson you are going to learn how to launch a container using the image which has been pulled here.